Hello, everyone. James Templeton here with Templeton Wellness Foundation. It's great to be with you again. And, I want to let you know I'm very excited today. I've got a great guest today, and he's a good friend, and he is the guy when it comes to understanding and knowing everything about sunscreens. And we're going to be talking about every sunscreen out there is not the same, and there's a lot of things you need to be aware of, and there's a lot of chemicals in the sunscreens, and there's a lot of them that are proclaimed to be the best and the healthiest and all that, and I'm not sure if that's true either. Just because someone says something is all natural and this and that, sometimes I don't know if you can totally trust them either. So anyway, we're here with Dr. Guerry Grune, and he is the foremost expert, in my opinion, about sunscreen and everything that's in sunscreens and all the research about some of the harmful effects of sunscreen. So you want to stay tuned for this. You're going to be very, very uh, interested in knowing everything he's going to tell us, and because he is the guy. So anyway, as you all know, I have a book. I always like to pitch my book a little bit because, it's about my story. I used to have cancer, how I found my own way back to health. It's my story about how I overcame stage 4 melanoma, and it's 40 years this year.
Wow.
And, we're going to talk about skin cancer, and melanoma is skin cancer. But, a lot of people have just non-melanoma skin cancer. There's a lot of people. But anyway, check out my book. I used to have cancer. Uh, I think you're going to find this very inspirational. It talks about how I basically crawled out of the hospital at 2 in the morning, and after 3 visits and 3 knocks on the door that changed my life, I probably wouldn't be here today. So it's a very good read. I wrote it. It's easy to read, and sometimes people say they can't put it down. So there's a lot of good things, information, things that I did to overcome cancer, and also the things I've done to stick around for all this length of time. And, you don't just get over something and just go back to the regular living and forget about everything. You keep your sleeves rolled up, you keep doing things. So I explain all that. And I think you'll enjoy this book. And you can get it anywhere, Amazon, any place. They've got it pretty much. So check it out. And also check out our restaurant guide, templetonlist.com. Templeton List is the healthiest restaurants in America. We've got almost 10,000 restaurants on there now, and it is the place you want to go to find the best restaurants. Farm to table, organic, the best ingredients, filtered water. All those things are very important, and the right oils that they're cooking with. All this is taken into consideration, and I have someone that spends every working day working on this for the past few years, and has put a lot of energy into vetting these restaurants and hopefully finding the best ones for you. So if you're a health conscious individual, or want to be more health conscious, or want to be more of a preventative type person that wants to, not get sick and become a doctor's Christmas present, I like to say, then hey, these are the places to go. These restaurants will work with you if you have special dietary recommendations from your nutritionist or doctor or whatever. They'll work with you, and you can just about guarantee that these restaurants are going to have the best of the best ingredients. So anyway, templetonlist.com. Also check out all of our interviews. We have a lot of expert interviews. Doctors, I think, are some of the best doctors in the world. Some of the foremost experts like today. that are, in their fields, and I think you're going to enjoy this. Get yourself educated. Education is the key. If you have cancer, educate yourself so that you can make the right decision, the right decision going forward, what you want to do next, whether you want to do conventional, whether you want to do natural approach, or maybe an integrative approach, whatever it is, educate yourself before you make that final decision. You didn't get cancer in 2 weeks. You got cancer over a period of time, usually 10 or 12 years. It just gets to a level to where it shows up somewhere, and now you have cancer, but you've had this brewing. You needed to make changes, probably quite a you know bit back, and you haven't. You've been busy doing other things. So it's very important, that you educate yourself, and that way you'll be able to make that right decision again. And also check out the interviews that I have with survivors like myself, people that have survived cancer for a long period of time, most of them 10 years or more. And, cancer doesn't have to be a death sentence. There's so much you can do nowadays. So many people uh, don't know what to do, but educate yourself. I think, sleep on it, pray on it, whatever. You're going to be able to make a smarter decision. So check us all out, templetonwellness.com. Templeton List, our restaurant guide. Check that out. I know you're going to enjoy these. I know it's going to be hopefully a blessing in your life. So anyway, let's get to the interview, and I'm very excited here. We've got, like I said earlier, one of the foremost experts in the field of sunscreens and in the chemistry that goes in the sunscreens. And but anyway, let's get after it here. And I want you to all meet Dr. Guerry Grune. And Gary, it's good to see you, my friend.
It is great to see you, James. And I didn't know anything about the restaurant guide. I just learned something. I'm hope people go and look for that. That's amazing. That's
Oh
great.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
I did,
we get a lot of people that go on there, and it's starting to, get better known, and it's all nonprofit. It's all just supporting people. It's something that I want to do to give back, because for
it's great.
years I traveled around looking for good restaurants, and you go to the higher end restaurants, so a lot of times they seem to be healthier, but they're using like oils that aren't really good, and or
Right,
and
right,
there's a lot of other ingredients that aren't the best, even though
sure,
they usually taste pretty well, but
right.
they're probably a better bet than some. But anyway, the restaurants that are on my list are the best of the best. So
Yeah, well, you
anyway,
brought up water, just the water. Some restaurants still use tap water, believe it or not. It's
oh, I
it's
know.
crazy out there. The restaurant world is crazy. My youngest daughter's working in restaurants lately, and she says you wouldn't want to eat there, Dad. So, so I get it. I
Well,
get it.
I'll tell you, it is an issue, and people, the first thing people should do is, that is water. You got to have good water.
Absolutely.
Water is the most important thing for life, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're more than 80% water.
Yeah.
Uh, we got,
Instead of just like, oh well, I don't have the best water filter set, but I'm eating organic food, or I'm
right,
eating, or I'm taking vitamins or whatever. There's
right.
a lot to it, and food. I think it's water, then the food, and then and it's and I'm a big believer in a lot of other things, but today we're here to talk about uh, some very interesting things that you've discovered. And Gary, tell us a little bit about your background and you know what you've been doing and how you got interested in sunscreens. And I just want everyone to know,
Sure.
uh, you know, a little bit more about your story.
Sure, sure. Well, I haven't written the book yet. Your book's great. I read your book, and I think we met right around the time you were getting ready to release your book. And when you told me you'd had stage 4 melanoma, I think we met at one of Ann Louise's talks, down in Houston, and we instantly bonded over the fact that that I had decided a long time ago that there was something wrong with the sunscreen industry, and I had two different occasions where I surfed also and still surf, and I had two young guys, different times, different doctors, 20 years old, and they both got melanoma.
Hmm.
And each one of them got told the same thing by their dermatologist: keep surfing, you'll get it again. So they quit surfing at age 20. Um, what started it for me, and just for your audience, just to make sure everybody understands, my doctorate is in chemical engineering. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a dermatologist, and I don't pretend to know everything there is to know about the skin or the medical condition that leads to cancer or skin cancer. But I do know a lot about sunscreen formulations, and learned that over the last 20 plus years. I guess it all started on an academic sort of level where, as a member of the American Chemical Society, I get a journal article. It's called C&EN News, so it's Chemical and Engineering News. Comes out every week. When you're a member of the ACS, you get it every week. Comes in the mail. I'm still old school. I like getting stuff in the mail that I can hold and read in my hand. And 2001, the front page article said, "Are sunscreens safe?" So that's now 24 years ago. Hard to believe. And congratulations again on the 40 years of being cancer free. That's unbelievably great.
Yeah.
And you look
Thank
great.
you.
You feel great.
Thank you.
And so,
And you talked about these surfers. Well, I was a
yes,
surfer.
right,
I was a surfer, and then I found I had a basal cell on my head, and 10 years later I had melanoma. So, there's
yes,
a lot more to it than just the sun. But anyway, go ahead.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so so I surfed too, and of course I was older than these guys. I was already in my 30s when they were in their young 20s, but they both quit. It was terrible, and I said, well, there's got to be something wrong. And then that article came out. It was a front page article, and it was written by a lady named Margaret Schlumpf, who was a toxicologist at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And I'm like, wow, I need to read this thing. And this was after I had come back from Australia, so I'd already had it in my head. Australia is a very interesting country because 90% of the population lives on the coast. They have to,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
center of the country is a desert.
Yeah.
And so I had come back from Australia and realized the sunscreens that they use down there completely different than what was made in the United States and used in the United States. And they were already using titanium dioxide and mineral sunscreens. Zinc was just in its infancy because the guy who invented nano-sized zinc oxide, who I also got to meet, had just really started doing that, and BASF was buying his patents, and I was doing patent work already. I'm also a registered patent agent. And so my understanding of all this was when I read her article, which I think is the seminal article on really sort of attacking the sunscreen industry in a way. When I say attacking it, meaning that she really looked into the science, and she found that the organic sunscreens, which are the transparent sunscreens, not zinc, not titanium, they really were having some issues with female rats. So what she was doing was she was actually putting the sunscreen organic actives, they call them, and she was lathering that onto the female rats, and their uterus was growing abnormally large.
Wow.
And so from that, she deducted correctly that those were endocrine disruptors or female mimicking hormones. And I'm like, I'm reading this 24 years ago, and I'm like, female mimicking hormones. I'm a guy. I don't think I need female mimicking hormones. Well, it turns out those are oxotoxic. So these endocrine disruptors actually disrupt the endocrine function, which includes, every one of the organs in your body, which
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to discharge wastes. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wait a minute. So I'm putting stuff on that I think is helping me, preventing me from getting skin cancer, but what's it doing to my body? And then, the whole issue with Australia and the fact that in those days, the big deal down there was the ozone hole. And all those people are talking about the intensity of the sun and the air and water pollution. That was back in the late 90s in Australia. So I was like, wow, there's a lot going on here that I need to know more about. And of course, that's the kind of person I am. I got a science and engineering background, 4 degrees. I better do something about this. And, mostly it was honestly to help my family and my friends and my
Mm-hmm.
fellow surfers and, develop something that was good. In those days, uh, Bullfrog was sort of the newest product on the market. It was the guy who invented that used beeswax so that it would stay on longer, make it water resistant or waterproof. There's no such thing as waterproof, but water resistant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is interesting. So naively, very naively, I decided I was going to come up with a set of formulations that were non-endocrine disrupting, cytoprotective, immuno-enhancing, and non-endocrine disrupting. So what does all that mean? Well, the non-endocrine disrupting was obvious, right? I didn't want to use these sunscreen actives, they call them, that were causing endocrine disruption. I didn't want to, and I wanted to make a proactive sunscreen or proactive formulations that would actually prevent you from getting skin cancer in the first place, instead of just, what sunscreen used to be was suntan lotion.
Yeah.
We grew up knowing about Coppertone and the famous billboard with the dog pulling down the little girl's, pants or panties or whatever. And, everybody knows, or everybody our generation anyway, knows that was how Coppertone got to be a household name. And, but it was suntan lotion. And
Yeah.
then in 1978, the FDA, federal, our federal government, they decided they'd get involved in all this. And the FDA came out with a monograph in 1978, and they started calling it sunscreen. And because it's applied directly to the skin, it's now considered an OTC, over-the-counter drug.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden, the FDA got involved, and the people that were making, sunscreen in their backyards or in their garages, and I'm guilty of prototyping mine that way myself, they had to meet these compliance rules that the FDA set in place. And the FDA only allowed the organic sunscreens at that time, and up to 25% of either TiO2 or zinc oxide. But in those days, 1978, the titanium and the zinc oxides were so whitening that nobody wanted to use them. You didn't want to look like Bozo the Clown when you
Yeah.
put this stuff on you, right? And so nobody was really using that. Well, fast forward to the mid and late 80s, and this Mark Michnick guy developed and patented the first nanotechnology commercial stuff was nano-sized zinc oxide. And BASF bought all his patent rights and started making something called Z-Coat, which could be formulated with sunscreen, but it wasn't really perfect, and it had a lot of problems. And so they had to treat the zinc oxide with silicone oil so they could even get it into a formulation. Well, by year 2001, 2002, 2003, when I really got involved in this, things had changed, that people were using more mineral sunscreens, or at least putting some mineral sunscreen actives into the original formulations, the methoxycinnamates, the oxybenzones, the avobenzones. We can talk about the chemical sunscreens, if you want to call them chemical sunscreens. They're all chemical sunscreens, but they're not mineral sunscreens. So
Yeah.
they started mixing that in, and I got involved in starting to make it, and was told, hey, there's no way that you can make an all zinc oxide sunscreen. Of course, the best thing for an inventor is to tell them they can't do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You want to do it. You want to show them.
That's right. Who are you anyway? And what do you know about sunscreens?
I'll
And,
show you. I'll come up with something. I'll show you, buddy.
That's right. That's right. That's the attitude, And so I worked years, literally, trying to figure out how to do this. I filed a patent application in 2005, and I published in the Journal of Toxicology in 2005. And it's very interesting how nobody paid attention to any of that. And, it was a long time ago now. And what happened was, long story short, is when we went and showed that we could make a non-endocrine disrupting sunscreen that had no female mimicking hormones, no endocrine disruptors in it, we published that and presented it. It was my daughter's birthday that month. It was in March of 2005, and I couldn't go because it was her birthday the week we were supposed to give the presentation. But my co-authors went, and they were told they had L'Oreal come up to the speaker's podium and said, "We're glad you didn't include ours in this study." Nobody wanted to acknowledge the fact that has been known now for a long time. Margaret Schlumpf in 2001, our little article in 2005, and what happened was we while we were formulating, we were testing, and the way I went into the testing of all this was actually had to do with something you and Ann Louise know about, which is muscle testing. I have a chiropractor kinesiologist since 1984 that I'd been going to see, Dr. John Schmidt, Wally Schmidt's younger brother, and he muscle tested every component that I was going to make into the sunscreen. And one of his first patients was a guy named Dr. George Clark, and Dr. Clark lived in Durham, and I teach at Duke, but this guy had nothing to do with Duke University, but he had developed a bioassay, and his bioassay was a luminescence. He called it Lumicell, and in that bioassay you can measure cell death down to 10 to the minus 16th power. So how that works is he used luciferase enzyme, which is what fireflies use to light up, or lightning bugs, wherever you're from in the United States, lightning bugs, fireflies.
Do they have those still around? You still have lightning bugs?
Yeah, not as many as we used to.
I used to, growing up in Texas, we'd get them and put them in a jar, and walk around with as kids. Exactly. They were everywhere, but of course I don't live in Texas now. So up in Idaho, they probably can't live because of the winters, but
I guess we have them down here. I'm in Virginia, Southern Virginia, so we do have them down here, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be. And I've read about that too. It has to do with street lights and all kinds of other stuff.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, getting back to this bioassay, he's a brilliant guy. He developed this bioassay to use the same enzyme that the fireflies use that lights up. And so if you put something into this biocell, or this lumicell, he called it, and it darkens, it means that you have cell death occurring. So he used female mice embryos, and what he did in our little study is he added different components of sunscreens, including the actual sunscreen compositions, to determine if something was an endocrine disruptor or not, a female mimicking hormone. And what we found was every single item that we used had some endocrine disruption. And it was so sensitive that when I was formulating this back then, I was looking at using silicone oil, because silicone oil is very smooth. It feels good on the skin.
Yeah.
It's in the copper tone, used it, and everybody's using silicone oil, but of course silicone oil is occlusive. Anyway, it turned out Dow Corning was making a very special silicone oil that was not toxic, supposedly. Well, when I got it muscle tested for this, it didn't have a strengthening effect, it didn't have a weakening effect. It was sort of, not really good or bad. It was somewhere in between. We measured down to 10 to the minus 12th, and that's when it showed endocrine disruption. In other words, cell death. So, when I learned all that, and we published that early, Burt's Bees got real interested in what I was doing. And in 2007, they hired me and they fired me. And they hired me and they fired me just before they sold out to Clorox for $987 million.
Wow.
They were going to make me, well, they did make me for 9 months their SPF formulator. They wanted to take the technology we had discovered and patented, and they wanted to infuse it into their night cream and day cream and, cosmetic line and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, never happened. But, long story short is it then led me to trying to commercialize what we had developed. Yeah. And that wasn't easy. That was a lot of work. That was a lot of work. But
a lot of batches, huh?
Oh yes. Yes. And we did it in Maine, of all places. So I was commuting to Maine for a while, and then eventually to Richmond, Virginia, and eventually, developed our own facility. But I think the thing that you're probably interested in, and your people are interested in, that are watching this, and your your audience are interested in is, well, you would ask me a really good question about whether or not the current sunscreens cause cancer, could cause skin cancer, because there's been a lot of talk now over the last several years. And of course, RFK Jr.'s leading some of that through NIH. And the question is, what's going on here? Is it worse to use sunscreen or not use it at all? And the question is, what should I do as a consumer?
Yeah.
What's good for me? What's good for my skin? What's good for my health? And what I tell people is, and I don't know if we have something we can show on the screen or not, but there is a very big distinction between the sunlight that hits you. Your body is designed to start to burn. Tanning is really not a healthy thing. We in the United States think that somebody who looks tan and is healthy and vibrant and all that, and that's all back to the Beach Boys days and Southern California.
Oh yeah, surfing,
but honestly, tanning. I went to a biophotology conference back in 2004. A guy named Eric Bernstein, a dermatologist who still practices. He's amazing. Probably the most I would say credentialed dermatologist on the East Coast. And they had a little article there, a little presentation called "Tanning Your Hide," and it was about the fact that when you're in an automobile, you're getting exposed to sun that's 5 to 10 times and even more intense than the sunlight that would hit you if you're not, looking through a windshield. For example, even a tinted windshield is not like a pair of sunglasses exactly. So the point of this is, what is it from the sun that causes you to burn? And this is where the FDA has it completely upside down. So it turns out that burning is caused by UVB only. So UVB, for people who don't know, are the short high energy waves from about 290 to 330 nanometers of wavelength. And that UVB light, when it hits your skin, for you and me, Caucasian males, who are light skinned to begin with, 20 minutes, let's just say 20 minutes in the sun, direct sunlight like we have here in Virginia, and it sounds like you have in Idaho, direct sunlight, no clouds, 20 minutes, your body is starting to turn pink. Why? Well, the answer is your body's designed to tell you to get the heck out of the sun because you're starting to burn. But there's another thing going on. It also means that you got all the vitamin D you need for the day. Your body has synthesized as much vitamin D from the sunlight as you need for the day. Now, of course, we can talk later about supplements and taking D3K2 and all that.
Yeah.
The best way to get vitamin D is from sunlight.
Yes.
It's the way our bodies are designed. Let's just put it that way, right?
It's healthy. It's healthy to get out in the sun a little bit, but people want to be out all day long. They got their shirt off. They're laying out. They're laying out in the sun all day long, and they're like, who can get the darkest? Who can get the darkest tan? And
exactly.
And it seems like the people that are more concerned about that are people that are lighter complected people, that are from Northern European backgrounds,
exactly.
and they're the ones that get all this most of it, not all of it, but a lot of the skin cancer, because they feel, well, I've tanned, I've always done this, and blue-eyed people, especially like me. And
blue-eyed, more susceptible for sure.
And everybody wants to look, like you say, wants to look like the cool, the hip, the tan, the surfer, the outdoorsman that looks cool, and he's
like the guy behind you who never used sunscreen, but he's got a hat on and he's got a scarf.
And how long? I mean, where we live in Idaho, we don't get but about 2 months of real summer, and after that, everybody's got long sleeve shirts on and it's cooler, and I mean it's great weather, but you're not laying out in the sun, basting in the sun. I live on the waterfront, as you know, and here on a river that's part of a lake system, and people, you drive up and down there on a hot day, they're all basting in the sun and all that, and it's like, but and I've noticed people, I don't do that. I learned the hard way, but way back. But I've had my issues, with uh, wanting to get out and enjoy myself like everybody else. But I just have to, get a good protection a little bit. I mean, I tan, but I
right?
don't want to burn, and I haven't burned in years and years and years. And I do tan, but it's if you're just out a little bit here and there, you do start to tan.
Oh,
It's
absolutely. And your body's
maybe
telling
not like the person next door that's out on their dock every day. So
right, right.
it's
Well, there's a difference between tanning and burning. And, with this UVB light and the way we're designed, 20 minutes in the sun a day,
hmm
you're not getting overexposed if you get out of the sun. But like you, I'm outdoor guy. I want to be outdoors and I want to be outdoors all day. So what about this SPF thing?
yeah.
So most people, I'd say 90% of the people I talk to do not really understand SPF at all. And
Yeah.
I'd say 100% of us don't understand how that whole thing came about.
What does
So
SPF
SPF,
stand for, Gary? What's it?
right, sun
What's it?
protection factor.
Okay.
So let's just say you and me are the same skin wise, but roughly, right? Let's just say
Yeah.
20 minutes in the sun, we start to turn pink. We know one of two things we need to do: get out of the sun or put something on our skin so we don't burn,
Yeah.
right? One of those two things. 20 minutes times SPF 30, let's just make it simple. SPF 30, sun protection factor 30, which most sunscreens in the United States now are 30 or more, is 600 minutes of protection. That's 20 minutes times SPF 30, the sun protection factor. It's a multiplication. So 30 times 20 is 600 minutes of protection. That is 10 hours, right? 60 minutes an hour. That's
Yeah.
10 hours of protection. But here's the problem: it's 10 hours of protection from just UVB only. So let's think about this for a second, right? You're not burning because you put SPF 30 on. So your
hmm
skin is still, well, brown or white even, because you're not burning.
Yeah.
But here comes the problem. And this is where the big problem is. In this country, especially because the FDA requires SPF. So it has nothing to do with UVA, not anything. So UVA are the long penetrating rays that go 2, 3 layers deep in your skin. UVB only goes the first layer. Your body is designed to start turning pink because
hmm
of UVB that goes into the first layer of the skin and turns your skin pink. If you've ever woken up sore, and I have, and I bet you had as a kid, and you don't do it anymore because we don't burn anymore. If you woke up the next day because you were burnt and you're sore, that is from UVA. So what UVA rays do is they actually split cells.
Wow.
They literally damage the skin cells by splitting them. And
DNA
if
of the
you have,
skin.
yep, and if you have nerve cells that are associated with your skin, which you do, everybody does, and those start to split, you start to have pain. And that's how UVA is so dangerous and why SPF 30 and blocking UVB light to stay out longer is actually an upside down. The FDA has it upside down. When you go to Europe, and I think I sent you this before we spoke, when you go and you look at the melanoma rates in the world, you go to Europe, the melanoma rates are lower. Now you can say, well, what countries? Well, Germany's rates have actually gone down. Italy's rates have always been low. You can say, well, the Italian skin is more used to the sun. All true. The highest rates in the world are in Australia.
hmm
In Australia, the Australian Cancer Society and the American Cancer Society, they're hand in hand. So they do everything the same. So in Australia, SPF, SPF, SPF also. But the problem with SPF, it has nothing to do with UVA. So UVA are the long penetrating rays that cause DNA damage, aging, wrinkling, and you know this better than anybody that I could ever talk to, if your immune system's impaired somehow, skin cancer. So
Mm.
that's why people are getting skin cancer. And that's why even now at age 65 in the United States, if you live to be that old in the United States, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to get some form of skin cancer. And we can talk
Wow.
about that too, because
Yeah.
the question is, are you going to get melanoma? Not necessarily. Basal cells that, everybody gets cut off now. uh, nematodes, which everybody gets cut off now, other
Squamous
forms of
cells.
skin cancer. Yes, exactly. And so that is what's causing this, I would say, quote unquote, epidemic. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, is the sunscreen safe? Well, yeah, the sunscreen could be safe because after 20 minutes, if you are now applying it, it's after 20 minutes that you're getting overexposed. But, I have a lot of friends that are darker skinned than me, some of them very dark skinned. And I've been down to Costa Rica surfing with them, and they get burnt too.
Yeah.
They don't understand because the sun is so intense down there how bad it really is for them,
It just
right? Because,
doesn't show. It doesn't show because they're darker skin.
well, they get marooned over time, but
Mhm.
they'd never experienced a sunburn in their lives in
Yeah.
the North America.
Yeah.
But still, and I'll never forget it. My buddy Willard, he says, well, what's happened to me? I'm all sore in my back. He turned around and his skin was maroon.
Yeah.
So, so it happens. So the intensity of the sun this time of year, obviously, is more than it is any other time of year, right? We're almost the longest day of the year. And so it's the overexposure that you have to be concerned about. But if you want to go back and talk about the chemistry of the sunscreens, we can do that as well. I just want to make everybody aware of what this whole SPF thing is about.
Mhm.
Because just because you're buying SPF 30 or 40 or 50, and supposedly the FDA doesn't allow anything more than 50 with the new monograph from 2011, but the big companies, the Playtexes and the Johnson and Johnsons and now Bayer, believe it or not, owns Coppertone. The big companies are they're not talking about anything except SPF because that's all the FDA requires. Now, it's true, the FDA says you can put broad spectrum protection if you have UVA substance in there that absorbs UVA. The problem with that is that most of the older organic sunscreens use avobenzone, and avobenzone is a UVA absorbent. The problem is as soon as the sun hits it, the molecule starts to split apart. And a couple of years ago, I guess last summer, there was the big scare about benzene and about where that came from. So if you're using avobenzone products, you got another potential toxic problem. And avobenzone works, it filters out UVA, but it also starts to degrade in the presence of the sun. So that's another thing that people don't really think about is, why do I use titanium oxide or zinc oxide? And I think you and I talked about titanium dioxide having some issues. It does.
Mhm.
The problem when you put sunscreen on your skin, when the UV light hits it, whatever you put on your skin changes. The only thing that really doesn't change is zinc oxide. That's the only product that people have been able to realize is completely stable in the presence of UV light, at least UVA and UVB light.
Yeah.
And so the mineral sunscreens, by and large, are the right way to go. And it doesn't have to be SPF 30 to help you.
Yeah.
Zinc oxide is really the best active, they call it active mineral sunscreen there is.
So the white paste that people were using surfing way back, 50 years ago
Right?
or whatever, was not so bad. It just was pasty and thick and
100%. In fact, that's exactly what happened. Is that's pure zinc oxide,
yeah.
and pure zinc oxide works. The only problem is you can't spread it all over your body, and
No.
so somebody had to come up with a way to do that.
Can you
And so,
imagine? Somebody walks out with all
exactly. And so the lifeguards had it right, and the lifeguards put it on their nose because, as you know, and it's happened to you, and it happened to most people I know. Wherever your skin is really, really thin, and your nose is protruding out towards the sun, and you're on the beach or you're on the water or you're, doing what you like to do, biking or hiking or whatever. I mean, that's the problem, is where your skin is thin. People don't think about their ears, about their nose, about their lips. Down in Costa Rica, your lips will get chapped in literally 3 hours because of the sun is so intense, in that part of the world on the equator. So, where do you use sunscreen? Well, and what do you use? I think you got to have a zinc oxide complex in the sunscreen. That's for sure, if you're going to use it. And you don't need to apply it unless you're going to be out in the sun more than 20 minutes. I think that's pretty reasonable. Now,
Yeah.
there are people with lighter skin than us, maybe for them 10 minutes and they start to turn pink. But whenever you start to turn pink, your body's telling you, hey, you got all the vitamin D you need. You're starting to burn now. Now you got to worry about UVB and UVA. And the UVA
Yeah.
is the stuff, that's the damaging rays.
Yeah, and it only makes sense to avoid the chemicals as much as possible in these sunscreens, because I read stuff all the time. I don't know how accurate it is, and I read more every year about, sunscreens, the oxybenzones. And,
Yep.
I hear something I read the other day, and I don't know if it's true, and it's like, but, they're saying, to avoid it. And they're
Right.
saying because it can cause problems, on the cellular level, and
Yep.
that are things we don't want to deal with, any of us. And we'll just leave it at that,
Right.
and it
Right.
also the let's see, here's another one, I mean, I'm just looking at the list of all this stuff.
Sure.
Titanium dioxide, according to that, it does some of the same things. The end result contributes to some of this stuff that we don't want on our face. So
All true.
let's don't use that stuff. Why use it? Avoid it, and don't overdo. And, when we're young, we didn't know, and we didn't even have sunscreen back in the day when I used to go
Suntan
out to
lotion.
the beach, and I didn't like the zinc oxide because of that. Like you said, couldn't get it off. It was so
Right.
thick. And, I've had a few issues with my nose, little places, you got, like, but it's not melanoma or anything. You just have little things, that you've had, and you just got to be careful, because when you're young, you're a little more stupid in most cases, and when you get to be a teenager, no matter what your mother or father tells you to do, a lot of times you just say, "Oh, I'm okay." You want to be like
Right.
these other guys, like you're saying, that are darker skinned, that can get out there all day, and you want to be like them, and
Sure.
get as many rides as you can on the surfboard,
That's right.
and
That's
you
all they
want to
care
be
about.
cool, and the girls on the beach when you're young, and you want to be cool and all that, and fit in and all
That's right.
that. I mean, it's just peer pressure, but
Sure.
down the road it comes back to bite you, and
Exactly.
or
Exactly. Our diets.
it can, and there's a lot of people that, and most of this stuff won't kill anybody, but it's a thorn in your side. Let's just say
It
that.
is, and our diets were a lot different too. And when you're a teenager, you don't mind going to McDonald's and Burger King every day, but that's not going to help your immune system. If your immune system's impaired and you're getting burnt a lot, and overexposed, and your diet's crappy, I mean, that's the sort of thing that can lead to, like you said, it doesn't happen in 1 year or even 1 month. It happens over time,
Oh, it
right?
does.
It does, and your overexposure over time is the big deal.
And there, and that,
Personally.
on every corner in every
Hmm.
town that's sizable at all, there's a dermatologist. I mean, there's several. There's a handful at least in the in our town, or more.
Right, right.
And there's cars, just huge amount of cars parked in front of their places all the time. And these people are walking out with bandages and all kinds of stuff on their faces. Well,
Yep.
it's a big business.
It's a
And,
huge business impact,
like I
right?
said earlier, don't become a doctor's Christmas present,
Exactly.
And
Well,
unfortunately, there's a lot of information out there now that people should be smarter than we were, because
right,
when I first had a basal cell on my head, the doctor says, well, I was only 23 years old. And the
right.
doctor says, you're having a problem at a very early age. He says, if I was you, I would use sunscreen every day of your life. And I said, well, where do I get it? He said, well, it's just came out. It was like, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 back then,
Right. It was four or
and
five.
who
You're right.
knows what the chemicals were in it,
It was mostly
and I'm sure
petroleum.
they could have put kerosene in there, I don't know. But so he says, look, there's some, probably gave me some samples and said, here, find something like this, like a moisturizer cream that has, SPF, uh,
Something.
10 in it or 5 in it. And
Right, right.
as it gets more and more better, the sunscreens, then use as high as you want, use it every
Right.
day. So what did
Right.
I do? I used it every damn day for
Wow.
30 years. I
Wow. Well,
used,
you know,
and
when
he says, sunny days, cloudy days, rainy days,
everything.
you do it every day. He said, do it on your face, especially your nose, because like you
Wow.
said, because that's the part that gets exposed. So I did. Well, I started having a few little issues, with that.
Right.
And who knows what those chemicals can do. I'm a big believer than putting chemicals somewhere in your body is that can actually show up in your bloodstream,
Right.
really quick.
Right.
Why do I want to put chemicals on my body? But see, then I was, like I said, I didn't know. And
Sure.
for a long time I knew better, but I still did it because I didn't know what else to do, thinking I was doing the right thing. Well,
Well,
now
you
I've
hit
met
on
people.
something.
I've
Yeah,
met
no, you hit on.
people.
Yes, exactly.
I've met
And
people
well,
and
see,
doctors that say, don't ever you do that again, so I
right,
don't
right.
do that now.
Well, I did talk about Margaret Schlumpf. You hit on something that I got to tell you about so that your audience will listen to something that's very interesting. So Margaret Schlumpf was in Zurich, Switzerland, I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
And she's the one who found this endocrine disruption from these sunscreens, which are not healthy at all, right? And so the Danes, I call them the crazy Danes, and if anybody's Danish, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to disregard the Danish heritage. It's good. They're smart people, but they took all the sunscreen off the shelves.
Yeah.
And the EU, which already existed in 2002, 3, 4, the EU said, you guys are crazy. You can't do that. Well, the Danes put all the sunscreen back on the shelves, the next year. But they did a study. And in the study, which wasn't released for 3 more years, in the study, they found that these endocrine disruptors, these active ingredients, the oxybenzones, the methoxycinamates, the
Yeah.
avobenzone, wound up not only in the urine, but also in the blood plasma.
Wow.
So this was 2004, 2005 when this was published. I think I sent you that article. And it turns out that the summary of the article says, well, yeah, it is getting into the blood plasma and into the urine, but it's such a small amount that, it probably would only injure, infants and small children. So
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. So parents are always saying, well, should I put sunscreen on my infants? Well, yeah, if it's the right sunscreen. So, I mean, it starts at a very young age now, that parents are like, well, what do I do? And how do I take care of my young, children? Well, don't put sunscreen on them that has the active sunscreens. And by the way, the inactives can be just as bad, because most of these sunscreens are oil and water. So you
Hmm.
have to use an emulsifier to keep them together. And the
Yeah.
emulsifier is toxic.
Yeah.
So the question is, well, what do you do? And so, but that was very interesting. The follow up to that was that the School of Public Health in Harvard University had a woman that published an article the next year, and it said, if it's a choice between the cheeseburgers and the sunscreen, I'll take the sunscreen. So she was comparing the health hazards to eating cheeseburgers, which I guarantee you, when we were surfing in our early years, we were eating, and the sunscreen, which she says, well, the sunscreen's less toxic than the cheeseburgers.
Yeah. Well,
Well, I don't think that's a good way to describe to anybody what they should do. I mean, yeah,
no.
it's true. Maybe we shouldn't eat cheeseburgers very often, but for sure we need sunscreen when we're getting overexposed. And you and I, in 20 minutes, anybody who's a surfer knows, in 20 minutes, you're not even in the water yet. You're just getting
Yeah.
in the water, right?
Well, I mean,
I mean,
people are out there I mean, they're doing so many activities. Surfing is like, it's like sitting in front of a mirror, and letting that, or being in a boat or laying out on a dock, I mean, that reflection, it just seems like you're like, oh my God, I just was out here for, before you know it, and you're having fun,
right,
enjoying yourself or whatever.
right,
But, I just think that, I mean, I'm not trying to tell people not to use any kind of sunscreen. They have to educate themselves and make their own decisions. But,
right,
because you don't want to be burned. But I know people with melanoma that have melanoma in places where the sun doesn't shine, and
right,
it's like they never got any. And I've also talked to doctors that say that melanoma, it can be different than the non-melanoma, which we know the other stuff is mostly caused from probably from the sun and maybe who knows what else, but chemical exposure from things on your skin. But the thing about it is that we know that melanoma can be caused from a chemical exposure in general, from
Sure.
being around a lot of chemicals, being in being having a toxic uh, exposure to certain things in the environment. Or, I mean, it's like me. I had melanoma. Well, what did I do for 10 years? I pumped gasoline. I had gas stations. I
Sure.
breathed this gasoline, and the
Fumes.
chemicals
Sure.
in the gasoline. What's the chemical in the gasolines,
A lot of chemicals in gasoline.
and you're breathing that stuff. And
Yep.
then I did work with PVC glues for about 6 or 7 years. You're sitting there, and you're down doing irrigation systems, and
Wow.
sitting there with
Yes.
your hands down in there doing it, breathing this stuff,
Yeah, a lot
because
of
that's
that
what
glue.
you do. Well, I
Yeah, a
mean,
lot of
oh,
that glue is
that had to be really, really toxic,
absolute 100%. THF is tetrahydrofuran is one of the solvents they use for putting PVC piping together. So you were exposed to a very toxic substance there.
So as soon as I kind of quit doing that kind of work, it wasn't long before I ended up with big problems, So,
Sure.
and I was really exposed a lot to this stuff. Plus, I was in the sun too, but
Right, right.
again, it's such an interesting thing, but people just got to be in moderation. People that word moderation always comes back to be the kind of the key, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I mean, like we talked and we've done this. You go out in the boat and you have a beer and you don't think about anything. You're just relaxing. Your mind's on other things. And you're like, well, and I know I've gone out deep sea fishing with these guys sometimes. And, we had one young guy, he went out with us once and he said, I don't need any stinking sunscreen. I'm fine. And we were out the whole afternoon. This is down in the Virgin Islands doing a deep sea fishing trip. And sure enough, we come back that evening, and all of us were at least 20 to 40 years older than this young kid. And he couldn't keep his head up. He had passed out within an
Yeah.
hour of getting to the restaurant where everybody was drinking and eating, and one of the guys was like in his 80s. And, he was fine. And
Yeah.
so the point being that, you just don't think when you're out there,
No, you don't.
enjoying yourself, and whether you have an alcoholic beverage or not. The thing is, you're not thinking about it, and the bottom line is until you start to really burn, which most people don't even see the burn until after they come indoors. You just don't think about it. But my advice, very simple. 20 minutes of exposure if you're a white Caucasian is probably enough to get all the vitamin D you need for the day, unless you're a special, you're either specially pale or you have a lot of melanin in your skin. Then it might be 10 minutes or it might be 40 minutes. But
Yeah.
SPF 30, SPF is all about you burning or not burning, and that's not the issue. It's upside down. In Europe, SPF is not important. They have what they call a Boots rating, which is a UVA star rating. And if you have 5 stars, that means the UVA absorption is premium at the top. And that's really what you want to look for is what are they using for UVA? And I recommend, like you had mentioned, I recommend it has to be zinc oxide. There's really no substitute for it. But, you and I grew up the same time, really. We didn't want to put pasty stuff like the lifeguards put on their skin. You want something that is a lotion version of that.
Yeah.
And that's, not easy to find actually.
Well, I know of one, and that's the one that you make. And I'll tell you that right now, I've been using that and I don't burn, and I bike ride and I'll be out for 3 or 4 hours in the sun and I
Right.
bike, I put this on. Of course, I've got, you know, your legs don't get exposed as much to that because they're
Right.
down under you. It's just the way it is. But, you get a little bit on the top of your knees and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your
Where
arm
the skin
on
is
your
thin.
arms and your
Yeah.
face and all. You got I wear a helmet and all that, but
Yeah.
I enjoy it. But of course, I'd rather when it's hot ride where there's a lot more shade, in the
Sure.
forest or whatever. But
Yep.
but anyway, I'm going to hold your sunscreen up here, Third Rock sunblock, and this is what I use. Now, I was just telling Gary a story. Last weekend, I was out shooting trap shooting, and I went out to with a friend of mine, and my friend says, "Oh, I forgot my sunscreen," and I said, "Oh, well, I've got some sunscreen here in my truck," and
Right.
I pulled it out. I said, "I've already put it on before I left the house,"
Mhm.
and because we're going to be outside for probably a couple of hours out in the sun.
Sure.
It was a warm day, and so anyway, I gave him this, and I forgot to tell him that a little goes a long ways. So he just soaked it. He just poured this in his hand. He's went like that, and I said, "Oh my God!" Put
Uh-oh.
it all over his
Uh-oh.
face, and it was just like white, like milky stuff all over his face. And
Right.
I
Right.
said, "I got it all over my face, but you don't see that, do you?" He goes, "No." He said, "I'm gonna have to wash some of this off." And I said, "Yeah, just a little bit." And I told him a little bit, and he just squirted it out like he's using the I don't know what kind of sunscreens are out there, but that girls do. Like the more the better because they want to smell good, and it smells like coconut oil and all this
Right.
stuff.
Coconut oil. Exactly.
I don't
Well,
know what it is,
difference
what
is,
kind they're using, but it smells good. When you walk
yeah,
on the
well, they're
beach and
using
you smell that,
sprays.
you go, "Oh, that smells good."
Right.
But
Right.
but but this doesn't have a smell. But but anyway, I was just gonna say this works really well for me, and you just go easy with it because it's zinc, and zinc is a little, it's different. It's not something that you can put it on your arms and legs and everything, but explain that a little bit because you made this up and you've
Well, so it turns out that every other sunscreen on the planet is made with water and oil. So the reason that your friend did that and he didn't like it is because he gooped it everywhere. And our product is a little goopy because it's made with glycerin. So glycerin does not evaporate. So every other sunscreen, the sprays especially, the sprays actually are alcohol and water. So when you spray that and get it on your skin, about 70% of it is not even getting on your skin. And if it does, it just evaporates right away. And so, and that is a problem with mineral sunscreens that are water based or water and oil based. And the problem is they evaporate. And so even though, you don't, people use more than they need to because what's coming out of the bottle is not what winds up on your skin because it's evaporating, especially this time of year in Idaho where it's dry and the sun is out. Most of that stuff is just going up into the air. Of course,
yeah.
the sunscreen companies love that because they sell more.
And they
But
spray in it. They got the spray bottles and all this stuff.
right,
But
right.
but
So you're
but
buying,
it's but with this, you just a little bit and you rub it in.
yeah.
You rub it in your hand and you put it on, and and I don't know how long the effect of it lasts,
Hmm.
but it
Yeah, I think that's an SPF 35 plus. So, obviously in terms of getting burnt, that gives you 700 minutes of protection from UVB. The key is UVA. So really the key is when you do a mineral sunscreen that's in glycerin like ours, what happens is the UVA absorption is the same as if you just, what we talked about, took the white stuff, put it on your nose. So we basically took what the lifeguards put on their skin and made it into a lotion. That'll
mm,
never turn into zinc hydroxide or titanium hydroxide, which are salts, which is what the other mineral sunscreens do. And the reason that you use a lot of it is because it's water based and it evaporates. And when it becomes salty like toothpaste over time, what happens is it doesn't have the same efficacy for UVA. So that UVA absorption that you're going to get, protection from zinc, is going to change when you have a water-based product. The glycerin never evaporates. So you told your friend exactly the right thing. You do it the right way because you've been using it, James. But all you need is a small amount. We grew up in the Brill Cream commercial days. A little dab will do you.
yeah, you don't need a half a bottle of it to
No, you don't. No, you
and
don't.
it's like I put it on before I leave the house and I go out
Right.
and sometimes I put it on again just because I don't know. Should you put it on every 2 hours or you don't need
Well, it's a
to?
good question. So the answer to that question is it depends on your perspiration, if you're in the water or not. It turns out the way this you can tell is if you ever splash water on your face and you have a little bit of a white, pale ghosting,
Yeah.
we call it,
Yeah.
then you're fine. But if water hits it and you're not seeing that, that means you need to reapply. So in Vegas, for example, we went out there many years ago, and the whole family was using it, and they all put it on their skin, and they swam all day, and at the end of the day, they still could see the white ghosting after they got wet. So really, one application for the whole day was enough. And
Yeah.
so even though my kids have freckles and are light skinned, I mean, they were fine. So it's just a matter of your body telling you, hey, you need to reapply because you've sweated it away or you've gone in the water. And of course, normally if you're on a boat, and you don't get wet, um, one application probably good enough, but your body is the thing that tells you. If you're starting to, the other problem is where do you apply it? Well, you apply it as smoothly as you can everywhere you can. We recommend doing this and then this to
Yeah.
put it on right. And of course, like you said, your legs, your skin is thicker in most parts of your legs, but where your knees are, your skin's thin. Where your ankles and your feet, your skin's thin. And so it's wherever your skin is thin, you want to apply. And do you have to reapply? It just really depends on what your activity level is. If you're just lying out in a dry, sort of desert-like climate where the humidity is low, you're good. But if you take that stuff and go down to Florida with it, where it's humid and you perspire a lot more, and the glycerin brings the water in from the atmosphere, probably every 2 or 3 hours reapply. That's
Yeah. It
probably a
makes
good
sense.
rule of
Yeah.
thumb.
Yeah. It makes sense. But yeah, it's, I mean, I guess you still tan a little bit, right, with this?
You do. The UV, well, even if people ask me this, well, what am I going to get vitamin D if I put sunscreen on? And I said, well, unless you dip coat yourself in a vat of sunscreen and every part of your body's covered, but the sun's going right through your head and you're getting UVB that way. You're not going to be able to completely block the UVB and the UVA. You're blocking a good percentage of it,
Yeah.
and
So
that's the
it's giving
key.
you're still getting enough to get a little bit of a tan because,
That's right. That's right. And the UVB is what gives you the tan, not the UVA. And that's the real thing. There is some, and there are articles on this. There is some strong benefit to having a tan from UVB. It's the overexposure that's the problem.
yeah.
Tanning beds. If you go to a tanning bed every week, and they tell you that's safe, I would argue with that. I don't think
Yeah.
it's safe at all. If you want to keep a slight tan and you keep your tanning bed, UVB arrays only to a minimal, yes, then I think that is helping you because it's helping your body synthesize vitamin D. And I think this because we've talked a lot about this over the years. Vitamin D synthesis is what keeps your immune system strong. That's one of the
Hmm.
things, not the only thing,
Yeah.
right? So getting sunlight, I think is vital. I worked for a long time, well, several years for the Swedes for Asea Brown Boveri ABB, and up in Sweden, they think that sunlight actually causes you to have a cold and actually causes sickness. But of course, you have to understand that for 6 months out of the year, they don't have hardly any sunlight.
Hmm.
you know, so I don't
Well, I mean,
subscribe to
just
that.
like here, we get a lot of cloudy days in the winter, and people go
Right, right,
crazy. Once you get the warm weather, they go crazy, and then they get burned, and they go out and
right. Well, their bodies. The
oh,
problem with
I gotta hurry and get some sun.
get some sun, exactly. But the problem is your body doesn't really store vitamin D very long.
No.
You know, it's like vitamin C. Vitamin D and vitamin C doesn't stay in your system very long, right? And
Well,
so,
anyway, it's a constant battle, a constant thing in life to keep your immune system strong, protect your skin, protect your skin's the largest organ. And
right,
there's a balance with everything and protect yourself, everybody. And use common sense and educate yourself like today, this video, and learn about the important things that you need to know instead of like, well, I didn't know. Because back in my day, I didn't know, and I was stupid and young and did stupid things like everybody when we're young, and we're invincible,
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're not invincible very long sometimes. So things slip up on you. So the thing is take care of yourself, keep your immune system up, eat healthy, take your vitamins and supplements, detoxify when you can, keep yourself healthy. That's the key to everything. And I think relatively that's the way it is. And, to make it through life and not have a lot of issues, just take care of yourselves. And any kind of cancer, whether it's skin cancer, whether it's melanoma, whether it's any other kind of cancer, it doesn't have to be, uh, uh, you know, the end of things. Skin. Hopefully, the basic non-melanoma is not anything you have to worry about. Just earlier you catch it, the better. And there's a lot of things you can do other than just getting cut up too. So
Yeah, well, you
that's
just
another
like you
video.
said, get it early. Don't let it metastasize,
Yeah,
because
just
that's where things get bad fast. But yeah, you're right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
we're still saying go to your dermatologist regularly and get checked, and but yeah, there's a lot that dermatologists are making off of this. It's a
yeah,
biopsy is somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000, depending on who's paying for it, whether it's the
yeah.
insurance company or you. But you
Yep.
know, but I mean, better safe than sorry, I think is what you're saying, and
Well,
I
you
agree.
want early, like if it's a so-called keratosis or something, it's a lot easier to deal with than when it's a full-blown, thing that started here and went over to here, and or
Right.
whatever. And I mean, it's just like anything. You just got to be aware, and there's a lot of other things you can do out there too. So just educate yourself and dig deep and find it. It's on the internet. Everything's out there. Not saying it's all good, but there's a lot you can do. But
That's true.
but
That's true.
anyway, Gary, it's been great talking with you today. Is there anything that we didn't talk about or we missed? Because I think our time's about up here. So
Probably not. Probably not. I think we gave out a lot of information. Hopefully, people will follow up with it. It's so great to be able to do this with
yeah.
you,
And
and I
how
think
can people get a hold of you?
oh, well, we're at so the website is Third Rock Essentials. It's the number 3RD rockessentials.com. And all those products are food grade edible. We say if you wouldn't put it in your mouth, why on earth would you put it on your skin? Just like you said, your skin's your biggest organ. So we're
Yeah.
at the number 3RD Rock Essentials, thirdrockessentials.com. And like you said, we call it Third Rock Sunblock, but the FDA requires us to say sunscreen. So it's Third Rock Sunblock Sunscreen now.
Well, check him out, everybody, and this is what I use. So it's
So far, so good.
I've been using it for ever since I've known you. So it's good stuff. So anyway,
I
thank
think we
you.
met each other before your book was even published, I think. So it's been about 5 years, probably.
Well,
Maybe.
yeah, and but anyway, I appreciate it today, and thanks for your expertise, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. I think you're going to come and give us a visit here soon.
Very soon.
We'll look forward to it. We'll do some bike riding.
Sounds great.
We'll
I'm
get some
ready.
sunscreen on and go out and have a little fun.
We'll definitely use some
Uh,
sunscreen.
Wear
I
our
hope the
hats
weather's
and do
good.
our, get out in the mountains and enjoy.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you. And everyone,
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this interview today, and I sure have. And this is James Templeton. Check out everything at Templeton Wellness, Templeton List. Check out my book. And I look forward to talking to you real soon. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.